So in theory, the London Cycling Campaign would welcome plans for a traffic-free river crossing, but we are extremely concerned that the plans currently contain no provision for cycling, as you said, Michael. As I understand it, under current plans, £60 million of public money would be diverted and cycling would not be permitted. The bridge would be patrolled by wardens, presumably at an extra cost, whose duties would include preventing all these awful cyclists. And for us, it would be appalling if so much public money at this point in time was spent on a new Thames crossing which totally excluded cyclists, when there is such a need for safe space for cycling in this overcrowded, congested capital. And on a personal level, we know from the recent tragic accident at Lambeth Bridge just how much is needed on the bridges to improve safety for cyclists.
And as part of Stop Killing Cyclists, we want people aged 3 to 83 to be able to ride their bicycles, and to have a bridge where you cannot ride a bicycle over it is absolutely disgraceful.
I wasted some of today looking at the 175-page business case, and what a dishonest document that is. I mean, it's a document that is clearly written by somebody who was told to come to a conclusion and then work out how to, and with some difficulty they did that. But now, on their own estimates, there are 865 people a day use it instead of a bus. 865 people. Now that barely that many fills about 10 buses or 20 buses. But it's a completely insignificant number in terms of transport system. You're spending, the key thing is you're spending £60 million of public money. 30 million of that is coming from Transport for London. Now, if they want to green London, what they should do, my idea, is give £1,000 to 30,000 streets in London, 30,000 residents' associations, and get them to have trees and planters and things to improve their streets. Imagine what a difference that would make compared with giving £30 million to this vanity project, which isn't a transport project.
The green space on the bridge is about 2,500 metres, so quite a lot of it, more than about 60% is actually hard stuff, because that's the people where people are going to walk. And then 2,500 square metres is going to be green stuff, bushes and trees, not grass, so you can't sit on it, to look at it. It leaves a standing capacity of about 2,500 per square metre, which is about one person per square metre when it's full, because they think it will take 2,500 people at any one time. We'll come to the crowds in a minute and what that means. What it does mean is that picnicking is going to be very difficult. They won't have groups on. If you come on with more than 8 people, you'll be stopped. And, well, the question is this a haven of tranquility? That's what Joanna Lumley said, it's a haven of tranquility.
We learned a moment ago this is not a bridge, but it's not actually a garden either. The haven of tranquility aspect, of course, is, do you realise that in this church you are in the middle of a very, very beautiful, big, available public garden. Just when you go out to the church, just walk around it, and you will see what to me is pretty much a model public garden. There's lots of space, there's lots of grass, there are activities, people can make fools of themselves, and it's also being well gardened. There are a good choice of plants. On a bridge in the middle of the river, the horticultural possibilities are, let's say, limited. In other words, trees will never grow big there. They're exposed to every wind that blows. You can't imagine more exposed site. Anyone here who's a gardener knows perfectly well that shelter is fundamental to a successful garden. There won't be any of that. If anyone here goes to the Chelsea Flower Show, they will know what it's like to be squished and trying to look at plants and walking around like this, looking over somebody's shoulder, hoping that you can get a glimpse of a plant. Well, the figures seem to prove that that will be the case.
People assume that as someone like me who's obsessed about gardening patches of land that I don't own in shabby places would be enthused about a new bit of green space next to a transport route, but I'm dead against it. For many of the reasons we've heard already, in addition to the pressure that it puts on London's most important gardening organisation, which, surprise, surprise, is actually Transport for London. They own huge and are responsible for huge amounts of green space and space that could be green. Because what's happened is that greenery has become the dressing for any kind of grandiose urban project. Ollie Wainwright has written a great article about this in The Guardian, and we must not be seduced by greenery to believe that it's good for our cities. Even the RSPB has reluctantly criticised this bridge, that it just doesn't do enough for Londoners or the birds.
We're all very familiar with the phrase greenwash, and it's usually applied to sort of companies that are doing a bit of corporate social responsibility stuff, but this is a very literal form of greenwash. Claims for environmental benefits for this simply just do not stack up. It doesn't make any sense at all, and as we've referred to in the earlier section, you take this money and you use it to create pockets of good green space scattered around the city. The public benefits will be so much more immense for the spending of the money. So I just want to actually refer to something else that's very close to my heart and very close to the Green Party's heart, which is kind of related to this, which is the privatisation of public spaces. And I think we had sort of reference to, the wardens patrolling up and down, and the banning of picnicking. And as a garden friend said here, if you can't picnic, then it's not a garden, it's not a public garden. But also, we've seen this happen with so many spaces in London. I so often, when I'm involved in both Green Party campaigns and other political campaigns, you play this game where you're standing in a little pocket of public space and you get chased off, the security guards chase you right at the end of the private space, and you have to be in this little narrow area. And if you think about it now, the River Thames is still basically a public space. And what we've got by doing this is actually more privatisation of that public space. And if we are going to create new spaces across the Thames, new crossing across the Thames, we've already heard the transport case that they should be walking and cycling. They also should be genuinely public spaces. People should be able to hand out political leaflets on them. Community campaigns should be able to use them. Public money, public spaces. That's what we should be saying.
They're expecting 5,000 an hour that will want to go on a Saturday afternoon, but the maximum capacity of the bridge is 2,500. And that's if we all stand at 1 square metre separating us. So you're going to have to queue, possibly for up to an hour, if those figures are correct. They're also based on the idea that people will be in and out between 10 and 25 minutes. They think people are going to come all the way to this place, queue, get on, and then get off again. Now they might do, because there's no toilets. That might be the clever plan. I don't know. But they are expecting 50% to do a U-turn. They're not even going to cross the bridge, which goes back to the transport point. Big issue about crime. There's no additional police support. There's been no analysis by the Met on this visitor attraction. Usually if you do a visitor attraction, the Met have a good look at getting people in on and off, like a football ground. And as I said, there's no toilets. I'd love to go.
Now obviously, because we've had so many different tourist attractions, we've got the Eye, we've got the Tate, etc., it's got more and more crowded, and now it's actually really unpleasant, and sometimes it feels really dangerous. If I had young children now, I wouldn't want to go up there. And to have the bridge there now, to put it there, which is 200 metres away from Waterloo Bridge, and it's £175 million for starters. Just to have it there with a huge build that's going to be on Queen's Walk, the last bit of green open space on Queen's Walk is going to make it really claustrophobic, dangerous for small children, certainly dangerous for older people, the sense of locality and localness gone.
I think it's an absolute disgrace that Boris and his friends try to claim that this is good for transport, at the same time as they've just cut 900 ticket staff where there are now queues at Blackfriars stations.
I also feel very strongly that the congestion that will be caused because of this bridge is going to be incredibly negative, not just on the residents, but on everybody who at the moment comes to enjoy the area, including the tourists. Somebody mentioned disability access. I think we already have a situation where it's very often like Oxford Street at peak hours, and actually it's incredibly difficult for anybody who's disabled, frail, people with small children, and the advent of possibly a 70% increase of pedestrians in the area during peak hours is completely unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable. And of course there will be additional cars, additional taxis, coaches, all of the paraphernalia of yet more tourists. But this proposal has not come from any strategic thinking about what the community or the economy or the environment in that area needs. It would make much more sense to spread the tourist offer, as they call it, either east or west. I represent Rotherhithe, and there's been a very strong demand for a stylish pedestrian bridge, which has never been met. A real need for it on to the east of Tower Bridge. And then over to the west, there's a real active demand for something like this near the Nine Elms area. Spreading the tourists out would make economic sense. I also just fear aesthetically for the loss of the gorgeous sweeping vista of the river, and I think that will be a loss for everybody. My last comment is I could hear people talking about TfL, etc. Do you know, privately, I haven't heard a single professional officer from the GLA or the TfL speak enthusiastically about this project. I think it's very clear to me and everybody in City Hall, this is very much a Boris project. And actually I feel that this demonstrates the folly of what happens when we have top-down government. It will not work for anybody other than the people that were at the dinner party where this was dreamed up.
The London View Management Framework is the framework that has about 30 views in London, key views of St Paul's and other beautiful views of the river and elsewhere that should not be damaged by development, have to be carefully judged. Any development that goes there, that needs to be the first thing that should be judged. It wasn't in this case, frankly. And in fact, English Heritage, who gave it a clear bill of health, didn't look at some of these views. They didn't notice some of the views weren't in the original application. And Westminster Council did, and they asked for those additional views to be provided, and they were provided very late in the day. But then English Heritage said it's fine. So that's English Heritage dealt with.
The whole point about the Thames here is it's a river. It is not a garden. It's as simple as that. It's a wonderful great stretch, curving stretch of water surrounded by embankments, granite embankments and buildings. Even the City of London has objected to the protected views being blocked by this thing. That's really all I have to say. Heritage, everything is spoiled by it. Not being, want to be completely negative, I can imagine a light, elegant structure for pedestrians and cyclists going across, possibly at that point, or somewhere along there, but that's not what we're being offered. We're being offered a design, as far as I'm concerned, that's rather banal and ponderous, really, and which fails utterly to connect with the embankment on either side.
People walk from Gloucester and Gloucestershire, they come to London, they expect to see these views, they're going to be blocked. Just the stretch of the Thames path through central London was declared by Lonely Planet as the second best urban walk in the world. And we're going to destroy those views, and we're going to make it even more untenable to walk along. So the Ramblers Association in London is against this bridge.
Canaletto painted this in 17th century sometime, and the idea that this will then be taken away by what is really, I think the guy at the back made the key point. It's about development, it's about making money, it's not about preservation. What I find shocking and what I think is really important for this audience to bang on about and campaign on is the fact that English Heritage have allowed this through without any kind of consideration or thought to this.
But I think we've really got to think on a broader scale of what's happening to our London overall. And if this gets through, how many other things, other views, other key iconic places in the city can be destroyed? This is going to be a really important battle on a huge scale about the whole future of London.
I got an email yesterday from Ian Ritchie Architects, International Association Bridge and Structural Engineering. They were outstanding structural award in 2000 for the Leipzig Trade Fair building, which included a bridge. It's the world's largest levitated glass wall. That's the bridge you can see going through, and there it is there. He's very angry. I'm fully supportive of the campaign against the Garden Bridge, an elegant pedestrian bridge crossing the Thames could cost £25 million. What is presented to the public is an indulgence, and to argue that this is what London needs as a sign of virility or tourist attraction to justify £175 million is absurd.
What normally happens at a big project like this is that somebody identifies a need, that's followed by development of a brief, and then typically you would have a design competition which is widely publicised, and then all of which happens in the public domain and under scrutiny. In this case, what we seem to have is something where someone's had to, we've ended up with a design, they've had to retrofit a need and a brief that happens to fit with the end design, and it seems to just go against the way these projects normally happen. If you accepted there was a need, then I would agree that if you're going to have a bridge in that position, then it should have cycling provision, and it should be open 24 hours. It would be the only bridge which is not open 24 hours in London. If the Millennium Footbridge is open 24 hours, why can't this one be?
I'm also a competition assessor for the RIBA, and I judge bridge competitions. Now, discomfort, somebody mentioned we should be dealing with what is done to London. I think we should be dealing with what is done to this country. I was brought up in Poland. The ambition of my family was to join the intelligentsia, people who think. This country is class divided, and to me, this project here is an example of a class divided society outcome. There is a certain class which wants it, and another class which opposes it. Then we have the procurement process. I happen to be on the panel of the architects for TfL for designing bridges, and we spent a huge amount of time and effort to get on this panel. This apparently was a competition, and apparently the participants were taken from the list of panel members. Hedwig Studio is not on the list. Moreover, referring to Hedwig Studio as an architect with bridge experience is a joke. You know, they built one curly bridge in Paddington. There is a firm called Wilkinson there, who probably are the best and the most known bridge architects in Britain. They are not on the list.
And I have real reservations about this whole process, but it seems in the assessment Heatherwick Studio was awarded more points for relevant design experience than either of its rivals, despite, as we've heard, only having built one bridge. And another bidder not only having built over 25 bridges, but actually won the sterling prize for one of them. It raises huge, huge questions. And I'm sure many of you will be aware that Joanna Lumley has been the driving force behind this bridge. And I've got nothing against Joanna, but she has boasted that she finds the mayor very amenable, that she's known him since he was 4, and we have had evidence that she wrote a handwritten note to him after the 2012 elections, gushing with praise for his re-election and begging him, please say yes to this bridge. There's also serious conflict here because Joanna Lumley has been an associate at Thomas Heatherwick Studios, and that was in the paperwork when their bid went in. And I didn't put this to the mayor, I put it in a very serious way, I'm afraid. As you can imagine, he not only laughed it off, he described and refused this independent audit, which I thought was a very sensible thing to ask for. He accused any of us who are opponents of the bridge, and particularly me, he described us as having a Taliban-like hatred of objects of beauty. That, I'm afraid, is what the Mayor of London thinks of us in expressing our concerns there.
Boris likening you to the Taliban, that whole performance he put in on 25th of March was a disgrace. We got the transcript, we put it into the judicial review, the judge saw it on the day, this is a pre-hearing we had a few weeks ago, he was horrified. And he just was sort of spluttering, saying, I don't understand what Mr. Johnson is talking about. What is he saying? It was very effective, so more of that.
The case has simply not been made for a penny of taxpayers' money to be spent on this grotesque white elephant. Yet the Mayor has effectively written a blank cheque up to the value of £3.5 million every year, in addition to that original £60 million, which could be spent on so many other things, or it could even be left in our own pockets to start with for us to spend on what we would like to spend the money on. It's not a garden, it's certainly not a bridge, we're not going to have 24/7 access, we can't cycle down it, and yet it's going to be given away as space for corporate jollies. There's been an obscene lack of scrutiny, as Caroline so articulately just put, about how this has all come about. I think we should oppose it. It doesn't provide any value for taxpayers' money, and I'm very, very pleased that Taxpayers Alliance will be part of the broad coalition saying no to the garden bridge.
Just a minor point that if you look at the summary, there is no public liability insurance cover, which obviously is an extremely expensive element.
So I think it's completely ludicrous that this project could be maintained at a cost of 3.5 million when it's going to cost 2.2 million to look after all the parks in Lambeth. Lambeth is the council that has put through this planning.
There's so many other issues. Temple Tube Station's going to be closed for many, many months. Over 30 mature trees will be felled to make way for this garden bridge. There are plenty of places on the river, such as in Rotherhithe, where a pedestrian and cycle bridge would be very, very welcome, and I'd rather see the money for this project being spent on that.
Somebody tweeted me the fact that there's actually an awful lot of people on the Evening Standard who are opposed to this, but because the editor is in favour of it, you're not going to hear a word against it in the Evening Standard. I am the only Labour male candidate to oppose this, and if I get the chance of being mayor, I will stop this instantly.
What it comes down to is property prices will go up and there'll be more tourists. This is something I urge you, everybody in this room and everyone on the Twitter feed at home, to get involved with, because this is one that we can win and we have to win.
Because George Osborne has been banging on about this and supporting it, and he needs to know that there are people who are annoyed all across London and see this as a terrible waste of money. There's people all across the country who are annoyed about it, and this is a terrible waste of money, and will go down like a lead balloon. Austerity? What austerity is the obvious question.